What's up, Milena?
Hello, PK. How's it going?
Good, good. How was your flight?
It was, long and
Exhausting.
uncomfortable, but
Wonderful.
safe.
Well, I hope you had some caffeine because we gotta keep it spicy for our lovely Power Hour audience here. So
Always
always caliente. Oh no, not caliente. Picante, right?
picante.
Picante. Yeah, good job. Good Spanish, Pete. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us and joining us for Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm your host, Pete Kazanjy. We'll give everyone kind of a few minutes to join here. So while we're waiting, give yourself kind of like a little bit of familiarity with the Zoom webinar interface. We want people to participate as much as possible, so please use the chat panel, the Q&A panel, so on and so forth. And let us know where you're calling in from on the chat. I am in San Francisco, and Milena is in lovely Atlanta, Georgia. Milena, while people are kind of like trickling in here, any big plans, any big travel plans this weekend, or upcoming travel, or recent travel?
No travel planned, but we are celebrating my kids' birthdays. So they were born they're both September babies.
Oh
So we're
goodness.
celebrating their birthday on Sunday.
Oh my goodness gracious. That must be that'll be a fun one for like contending with for like the rest of their childhood. The
It
fact that
will be
like they have to like fight over that. Was that like on purpose? Like very well planned, or is it like, yeah, no.
2-for-1 special. Only one event to plan, only one RSVP list to deal with, only one cake to deal with. And, they're turning 2 and 4.
Efficient. Very efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like
I don't
it.
think
It's
my
kind of like
2-year-old
going
will
for
mind too much that she has to share
yeah.
her birthday with her brother this year. I mean, next year will probably be
Yeah.
different.
I was gonna say as soon as they get to like when she becomes like 6 and he's 8, then she's gonna be like WTF, man.
100%.
Awesome. Well, I hope they have a good weekend coming up. I am taking my 5-year-old to a submarine tomorrow in the San Francisco Bay. So he's super juiced on it. So that's my big kind of like plan coming up.
That
Awesome.
sounds
So
awesome.
yeah, it should be fun. So for folks who aren't familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. So MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related disciplines. And the community's mission is like pretty straightforward. It's to create an environment for our 30,000 members to answer questions they struggle to answer on their own, help them see around corners they may not know about. And so the way that we do that is through great live sessions like this, through our online forum, which is pretty awesome. Literally, I was just searching in it earlier and sending like search result hyperlinks to like this CMO who was like, I have questions about SDR compensation plans. And I'm like, here's the search results from the MSP forum. It's rad. Go have fun. And also in-person events. We have a sick in-person event happening next week, Dreamforce Happy Hour here in San Francisco. So for folks who have not or weren't previously admitted to MSP, we'll go ahead and add you after this. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. Power Hour is a unique format. We're not going to be going through a specific piece of content. Rather, we're here to pick the brain of the illustrious revenue leaders who have joined us. So that's you, Milena. You're illustrious. So the reminder here is that folks are here to learn. Please ask questions as they come up. We have questions that were provided ahead of time as well, but like do ask questions that like you're inspired to ask because we're kind of like talking through things, in the chat, in the Q&A, via smoke signal, whatever. With all that, so let's do some introductions here. I'll go first. Age before beauty, obviously. My name is Pete Kazanjy. I am the founder of Atrium. I'm also my fancy pants title is also CRO. And prior to Atrium, I started a software company called TalentBin, recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really where I kind of got on my like modern sales journey. Was I was our first seller. Excuse me, I was business generalist founder, first seller, first sales manager, and then our sales leader. And then when we got acquired by Monster, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster's 600-person sales organization. So a little bit of a change there. And then subsequent to that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and also started this little thing called Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit about me. Mills, you want to introduce yourself to folks and kind of help them understand how what you've been working on, what you work on here at Atrium, and then also, what kind of brought you here, and the kind of other sales management and selling roles you've had?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pete. So, hey, everybody, my name is Milena Kaul, but everybody calls me Mills, as you heard Pete saying. And of course, Will Bracewell. Hey, Will, on the chat. We used to work together at Sales Loft, but I am the VP of sales here at Atrium. I joined just 3 months ago, and I was so excited to join Atrium.
Hasn't run away yet.
Not yet. Well, and I haven't been kicked out yet, which is awesome as well. And I was just so excited to be a sales leader at a company that serves sales leaders, right? Like it's not common in one's career to drink their own champagne in the way that we do. So I felt very fortunate to have the opportunity to do that, as well as to basically learn from one of the biggest celebrities in SaaS sales in the form of Pete Kazanjy. So I'm delighted to be here. And I've sold a bunch of different things over my career. You see Flock Safety and Sales Loft and eMarketer. So I've sold, license plate reading cameras. I've sold sales engagement, I've sold research. And my first sales job was actually selling CDs. So obviously, right? Typical resume. So it's been a fun journey, right? And it's been fun to see, what changes with industries and what kind of stays the same regardless of what you sell. So that's been fun to identify those patterns through my journey.
It's so funny. I can imagine some memes we've got to get going on the sales organization here, like Milena on the side of the street in New York, kind of like banging CDs at each other, like, hey, you want my mixtape? You want my mixtape? Like, here you go.
No, literally, I would drop demos.
It wasn't that though. You were like, what was it you were saying? You were like carrying around like giant cases of like CDs like up and down Manhattan.
Yeah, well, it was New England actually, so like Boston or in Connecticut or Vermont, but yeah. And I would carry all the display cases where we would put the CDs so they could be sold, or like the listening stations where people would put on the headphones and listen to the first 15 seconds of the first 3 songs of the album. It was really fun. It definitely taught me to be fearless and just walk in and start selling,
Yeah, outside. I mean, true, low ASP outside sales as opposed to bougie high ASP outside sales, and probably full cycle too. Did you have to do success stuff also? I'm out of CDs. I need more the listening station, or if they didn't pay, go pull money out of their cash register.
Yeah, so definitely account management was involved to make sure that they were well stocked and with their best sellers. And and if they didn't pay, and we had tried to collect the money, but were successful, whenever I went to go visit that territory, sometimes I would just go into their stores and walk away with whatever inventory they had and would post it out and credit their account back when I got back.
Elena's cruising into the music, the music store, and she's like,
mine. This is mine, not yours. Mine.
This is mine. Sorry, you were on net 90, not net never. Sorry.
Exactly. Literally.
Oh my God. Amazing.
It was really bad.
All right, killer. Well, we have some really good topics that people have kind of dropped ahead of time. Some things I'm interested to talk about here, and of course, whatever questions that show up from the chat here. One thing that I think that I would love to kind of get your take on, and I'm sure everyone else in the audience would love to hear about this, is selling in competitive markets, right? So obviously, there are at least, in the enterprise, kind of in the mid-market, in the enterprise, there's kind of 2 hegemons in sales engagement. There's Sales Loft, and there's Outreach. There's a bunch of other kind of cool providers as well, with different niches, whether you're talking about Apollo or Mixmax or Groove or what have you. Hopefully I'm not leaving anyone out. Someone's gonna text me and be like, you forgot to mention me. Pete, what are you doing?
We
But anyway,
probably
like
left somebody out, but
I
there's so
know
many crazy
I'm
things.
the worst. I'm the worst. But like, when sales engagement was like the new hotness, and not kind of like something that, all the early adopters, the kind of early majority have adopted, it's a pretty competitive space. Even still, what were the kind of the biggest things that your biggest kind of like ways that you guys dealt, or like you dealt with that, and kind of like, or like what would be your words of wisdom for folks that are operating in very competitive spaces themselves, in other categories?
There's so much, so much. But I would say, first of all, don't let it get to you. It's actually it's a blessing to be in a hyper competitive market, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it means that whatever you're selling is in high demand. And so
Mm,
you're in the right place. Like your
mhm,
product is going somewhere when it's so
mhm,
hyper competitive.
mhm,
The other thing is, as a seller or as an organization, whether you're in sales or product or whatever, it
mhm,
keeps you on your toes.
mhm,
You have to
mhm,
be on your toes. So it applies pressure for excellence.
mhm.
Um, and so it might be very stressful in the moment, and it actually is very stressful, but just know that long term, it's going to build some muscles that you might not get elsewhere. I've been at two companies since SalesLoft, and I haven't seen that level of competition yet. But
Yeah.
I definitely still carry the scars and
Mhm,
wisdom that I learned, 2 years ago, when every single deal was a knife fight in a phone booth against Outreach.
yeah.
Um, so we focused on just, controlling what we can control. And the number one thing in sales that you can control is the sales experience. So you want to make sure that whenever a prospect or a customer walks away from an
Yeah.
interaction with you, that they walk away
Mhm,
feeling delighted. And
mhm.
brand loyalty, like 30% of brand loyalty comes from the sales experience. So that's really,
Totally.
really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's something that we all I like. I mean, most of us probably like are selling in high technology in some sort of capacity, um, and we kind of get like wrapped around the axle about like speeds and feeds and kind of like features and so on and so forth. The funny thing about that though is that like, ultimately, like what we're driving towards is outcomes. So like Gainsight is one of our customers here at Atrium, and we love those guys. Like, I mean, but like the reason I bring them up is because like we're super obsessed about customer success, but then also like, success can happen pre-sale as well, right? From an education standpoint. So if somebody walked away, even if like, I don't know, like the CFO blows up your deal, or like, some decision maker comes in off the top rope at the like the final, at the like the last hour, and like, makes it go in a different direction, even though you have a bunch of champions who are super juiced on your solution. If you've done a good job of like building rapport, building trust, and like, people talk about like being consultative or whatever, but like actually being consultative, like educating your prospect while you're working with them. We do this through the form of like making sure that we're sending people books and content and so on and so forth. But like, even if you end up losing the deal, um, that person, like, that business will probably come up, for bid in the future. And then also people move around in a big way, right? Very big way. And we see that quite a bit at Atrium, where you have like sales leaders, SDR leaders that are kind of like moving around, and now we have enough customers where they like some of our former like people who like someone who was in a closed loss op like lands at an existing customer, and they're like, "Oh, yay, I get to use Atrium," or they like land in another spot. Like it's the first call that they make. It's like, okay, cool. Like I have I've been charged with like making changes here, and the first change I want to do is help this organization be more data driven. So I think it's one of the phrases we use is like lifetime value of the human, right? Like
Mhm.
rather than lifetime value of the customer. And so if you do a good job of facilitating that connection, that can be a really powerful thing, especially if you stay in that industry, right? Because like in your case, you were in sales law selling to sellers, and then took a detour to sell to HOAs, which we'll talk about in a second, selling license plate camera readers to HOAs, and now you're back selling to sellers again.
Back home.
Um, yeah, back right, exactly. So actually, let's talk about that a little bit because I think it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Like obviously the buyer, the sales loft buyer, and like the Atrium buyer as well is like pretty sophisticated, right?
Mhm.
Sales leaders. I mean, we look good, but also, we're not dummies, right? And sales operations, usually pretty technical, et cetera. But then at Flock, like that was a pretty non-technical sale, or sorry, it was a technology, but like selling to a non-technical buyer. Um, what was the biggest kind of like changes that you had to make when kind of managing that team? And that how many sellers was that? It was like 15 sellers, 20
30.
sellers? Wow, 30 sellers selling in a non-technical audience or like non-technical buyers. What was the biggest changes that you had to make there?
So, at SalesLoft, and I want to give credit to Kyle Martin here because he really taught me. He taught me how to be better at discovery, and he was Sandler trained. So we talked about level 1, 2, and 3 pain. Level 1 being business pain, level 2 being financial pain, and level 3 being personal pain. So what was different going into flock safety is like level 1 and 2 pains don't matter. You have to get straight to level 3 because you're
And
selling.
this was the case with the HOA people because like it wasn't
Yes,
their actual job to give like HOA is the homeowners association. Like it wasn't like they didn't have a company to like care about. It was like their neighborhood or whatever. But they were like it was kind of like it wasn't even their job. It was like their hobby or whatever.
exactly. So that's one reason why you had to go straight to personal pain is because it wasn't really a business that you were selling to. And then the other thing is like license plate reading cameras, right? What is the reason that you might buy a license plate reading camera? Is because you're trying to stay safe. You're trying to eliminate or minimize crime. And so it's a highly emotional sale. Right. Because even if let's say something as simple as getting a package stolen from your porch, like that can be traumatic for some people. It's like, oh my God, well, that happened. When might it happen again? Or when your car gets broken into, you do feel a little like a sense of violation. So for that reason, it was really important to go straight to level 3 pain, understand personally, like what is a challenge that they're trying to overcome, which is like, I don't want to feel this way again. Like that's scary as hell. So just basically going straight to like the neighborhood gossip to understand like what happened. Like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. Like, what kind of conversations have been happening post this event, like a house break-in or a car break-in or even a package theft. So it was like the framework still works. The framework of Sandler was still applicable, but only part of it, right? Or part of it was the most impactful.
Yeah. And yeah, you can imagine that along like a variety of vectors. It's like, hey, how did you feel after your neighbor's car got broken into? And then also it's like, oh man, like as the head of the HOA or whatever, like, hey, what's your day job? Man, I'm a dentist. Right.
So you get like
And like,
retired people, like military personnel, like
but it's
everything.
like, oh, okay, cool. Like you're a dentist. So how how's your real job? How's your real job going? Oh man, well like I just opened another location and I lost my office manager and like I'm burning the candle at both ends. Oh wow. Like I can imagine it's like really fun every time you guys like have something going on in the neighborhood and everyone comes like banging on your door to for you to solve it. Oh man, it's the worst. Got it. Yeah. Well, I heard from Susie that like there's been quite a spate of porch piracy recently, blah blah blah, blah, right? And like getting there. Yeah, I think that's really smart because you know what we like here in like Techland, we don't do that enough. We're all in
Hard.
like
And it's not,
ROI
yeah.
and like I mean like I'm not trivializing it. Like I
Yeah.
think especially I think we're all like way more like left-brained in this regard.
Mhm.
Um and I think that this is something like our customer success function does this quite a bit where they, because what we're doing is we're helping organizations do a better job of like using data to improve the performance of their teams, right? To manage by metric. And that's a new muscle for a lot of folks, especially for like junior, like we work with a lot of junior managers, right? So if you got like a 26-year-old SDR manager or like, a 30-year-old AE manager who's like, been a manager for like 1, 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, it's like a new muscle. And so really kind of like characterizing to them how this is going to like, it's like the carrot and the stick. right? Like this is gonna be good for your career. Like we call it future CRO clubs, like Club of
Yeah.
America, right? It's like cool. Like if you're a good Atrium user and you learn how to manage by metric, like you're on this path right here. If you're not, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. And like that's a little bit of like the stick component. And I think that yeah, we could all do a much better job of kind of like getting to that personal pain. Like I really want to make director. I really like my
Yeah.
5-year goal. My 5-year goal is I want to be a VP. Like I'm an SDR manager right now, and I want to be a VP of seller. I'm an AE manager right now. I want to be a VP of sales. Okay, cool. Well, you're gonna need to get cozy with math because guess what? Like the board of your of like that company that you're gonna be the VP of sales of, like they're gonna laugh your ass out of the room if like you're not super facile with managing by metric,
Yeah.
right?
And that's what I try to go to sometimes is like, what are some customer stories where people using Atrium or SalesLoft, they were promoted? And I think those types of stories, to your point, resonate really well, more so than like they saw 382% ROI on like
I know.
ops or something like that. Like, okay, whatever. I don't even.
That's for the
I
CFO,
don't
right?
even
It's like
know.
it's the it's the different personas there. I mean, like we see this a lot, right? Like, and this is something we've tried to do a much better job of is like when we're selling, because one of the cool things with Atrium is like we sell on customer data, and so like very quickly managers are just like very quickly managers like they get it immediately, sales operations get it immediately, but then like second or third level leaders, like because they're so far away from like the rep level, right, sometimes a little bit more abstracted, and like
Especially in a
humans are
remote
humans,
world.
right? Yeah, like humans are humans, and like they want something for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you are a CRO or VP of sales and you should be in the business of enabling your managers, like yeah, we all know that, but like hey, what's in it for me, like
What's in
selfishly,
it for
like
me? Skin in
yeah,
the game.
like
I'm obsessed with skin in the game.
yeah, like direct. And I think there's like good product feedback there for everybody. It's like, you know, uh, product and also sales motion around like how you can, how you make sure that there's something that's like very tactilely for the like sorry, tangible. There's something very tangible for that persona who like should maybe like understand that they should be enabling these other folks, right? Um, that like that would be the end users or what have you. But then you also probably got to have like a cookie for them,
Yeah.
right? In some sort of capacity.
And you know
Which
what's
actually, go
I
ahead.
was going to say what's interesting also is like the reverse is also true. So let's say one of your ops gets stuck, right? And I think that a lot of the times this happens is because they are not sure of the value of whatever you're offering, and therefore they don't want to put their name on that solution because that could, tarnish
Sure.
their internal brand.
Yeah, like
Which,
they
and
know
that's
that
a
it
whole
like
free pain.
they know that it's slaps for them, but then they're worried about what the perception will be from like above the power line or maybe an economic buyer or whatever. They're like they know that they can articulate, oh man, this is really great for me. Oh, is that because like you're selfish or like or what have you? It's like no, because I know that this is good for the business, but it's also like really nice to have that like thing to be able to sell with internally, like, hey, this is really good for me. Here's the reason why it's important for the business that I have this thing. Also, here's why it's good for you.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's important for sellers to equip our champions or, whoever is talking to us to make sure that like, they can sell it internally and that, because they're thinking, oh my God, if we buy this and it has my name on it and it fails, that's an egg on my face. So we always
Yeah.
have to really empower our buyers to feel confident that the risk is it's none or very, very low, that they're not going to have an egg on their face, that nobody ever gets fired for getting Atrium or SalesLoft.
Yeah.
Actually, quite the contrary. People typically get promoted.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say that's how you flip it around the other way, which kind of goes back to the personal, right? Like the personal value proposition where it's like, hey, like not only is this important for you, but if you are not only is like being a better data-driven manager, a data-driven leader, or what have you, like really important for your career. Also, if you bring this solution to your organization, you're gonna like and like you are the Prometheus bringing the light, right? Bringing fire to to the rest of your organization. That's going to be a huge feather in your cap, and that's like we're having really good customer success.
Mhm.
Like having really good success that you can rely upon, but also like the documentation of those like success outcomes from a marketing standpoint is really powerful. I think the buyer enablement, I think, is a really good observation there. That's something that we've done quite a bit. And I remember having this conversation with your and my good friend Jeremy Donovan at this lovely Sales Loft customer dinner. Is at Slanted Door in San Francisco. And Jeremy and I were talking about mutual plan software because, of course, like what else would you talk about over dinner? Obviously. And we're just talking about like buyer alignment and what would like this was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And so we were talking about like Google Sheets or whatever, but like now we use dedicated software for this. Like we use Accord as a mechanism by which to, and it's like really like it works really well with the sales assist motion because again, Atrium's already live on a customer's data and like it's already showing about the insights around like this rep has these issues right here, or you said that you wanted to solve this pipe hygiene problem and look at this, like here's the views that came out of this and already the impact that's happened in like the first 2 weeks of you guys having this live and you guys aren't even customers yet. But if that stuff's like ephemeral, right, or like lost in some email versus like tightly packaged, I think that like you're definitely, fighting with one hand behind your back. Did you guys do any like I mean, obviously we use the hell out of Cord here and other people use other solutions like Recap and what have you. Did you guys do any sort of like mutual planning software or sorry, mutual plan documents at SalesLoft? Obviously not at Block
We didn't
Safety.
use back in the, I don't know if something's changed. I don't know if Will Bracewell, you want to chime in here via chat to let us know if anything's changed at SalesLoft, but we did not have software for mutual action plans. So we used like
Sheet.
slides or Google Sheets to just, kind of project manage the deal. And the same thing at Flock, we used Excel spread or like Google spreadsheets.
Yeah, we used to have this thing. This is like, I love to make fun of myself as like as a product marketer and like, kind of like booty sales leader. But so one of the things that we did at Atrium early on is because like we needed a place to aggregate together like these insights and these like these successes and whatever. And so originally, so we had a slide deck, a Google slide template or whatever. I think we called it like a sales strategy review. It was like this like total like word salad that I had come up with. It's absolutely ridiculous. Because it was like trying to make it like sound fancy or whatever. It's like 3 years ago. And then like the problem is like we had this like phrase for it that was like customer facing, which like here's your sales strategy, review and like but like we didn't have like a term for it internally, and so we would like just be like use like fumbling over our words when talking about it internally. And so finally, initially I was like, okay, well, what would be the right word for this? Like it's the thing that you put, it's like your folder that you put all your like your good stuff. And I was like, oh, it's like a trapper keeper. And the funny thing was like all my reps were like, what the fuck is a trap? What's a trapper keeper? Right. And I'm like, oh, I know. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old. And I was just like, all right, fine. It's a hot pocket. It's a hot pocket. It's full of gooey goodness. And everyone's like, yeah, hot pocket. And now we have retired the hot. We have retired the hot pocket, and instead
it's going to make a comeback in the Accord.
Yeah, exactly. Hyperlink. All right. Well, hey, we have a cool question here from. I hope I'm going to pronounce this name right. Sugam. Hoping to hear from Milena. What are secrets to success for building great teams, right? Like what is the great ways of building up taking a sales process to the next level? Let's talk about teams first. What's a great way of building teams?
Karaoke.
Obvi.
No, but yeah, that's a really great question. It's Sigum, thank you so much. And it's also a very loaded question. So maybe we'll cover some aspects of it. And if there's something more specific that you want to hear about that we have not covered, by all means, let us know in the chat. But I guess we can start from the top of the funnel, like hiring, right? I've probably interviewed over like 100 candidates in my career, if not more. And my philosophy on what's important has evolved over time based on like trial and error, and then documenting like when somebody didn't work out, like, did I see any
why
in the exactly in the interview process?
We'll avoid that.
So one of the patterns that I recognized was that I was putting too much emphasis on the discovery process. Like, for example, at SalesLoft and at Flock, and I haven't interviewed at Atrium yet, but I think we do mock presentations, right, at Atrium during the interview process. So that's probably the most insightful part of, the interview process. And at that time, and what I would do is put a lot of importance on the discovery. I'm obsessed with discovery. But I think I put too much emphasis on it. So like, I was like, oh, they're asking great questions. But then I don't think I was paying attention to whether they were listening to my answers and then using what I had used to then like build upon what they were selling. So maybe I put the wrong emphasis. I didn't apply the discovery interview process well enough, but I was definitely burned by people that I thought had great discovery in the interview process and then failed to have it when they were in seat. So conversely, what I was not placing enough emphasis on was what I like to call the Cardi B closing clause, and just being extremely assertive. Yeah, like, I'm going to close you. I found that people that didn't work out, they were very timid sellers. And it's very difficult to grow clause, right? If you don't necessarily have them. And if you have too much
clause, long investment,
you have to file them down.
Yeah, that's a much better problem to have.
It's a much better problem to have. So from a hiring standpoint, like the number one thing that I look for is like being an assertive closer, whether that's in the mock demo or even throughout the interview process, is like, hey, so like, what are your first impressions of me? Like, what are you skeptical about on me and my, potential to succeed at your org? Like, oh, damn, like that's a great closing question, So it's like treat
close
and close it, right? So that's what I can say from like building a team, like from the hiring standpoint. And then once you have the right people in seat, I mean, one thing that I was, before joining Atrium, I was a 2-time customer. So I love the product. I believe in it wholeheartedly. And it, just always be performance managing, right? Like always take inventory of the reps that you have, using data, using facts, not feelings, to just make sure that like, everybody's trending in the right direction and that you're not, don't lower your standards. And when you find room for improvement, like coach accordingly, right? And Atrium, things like Atrium or whatever, you might use something else,
or like chorus or gong or whatever for like, I mean, there's different types of coaching, right? There's like metrics based, which helps you identify like when, where the shortfalls are. And then, it lets you kind of zoom in from there, or just like, like pure like level of activities and kind of things like that. But yeah, there's like lots of things there, and you gotta use it. It's been so hard over the last like 5 years though, when like, especially in like a very, very loose economic or like monetary environment where like there's just like so much like, so much money bidding after sales talent, that like people, you're really loath to performance. Oftentimes you can be loath to performance manage. You're like, it's like, oh man, I gotta like grow our revenue really substantially, and I really need to button the seat here. So like maybe this person's on the bubble, and like maybe they don't actually have Cardi B clause, but like maybe I can like tell myself a story that like, I don't know, we'll get some lead press on nails for them, and like, it'll be good. It can be tough, and I think the thing there is like every time my point of view on that is like every time you try to compromise in that regard, it always burns you. And I actually have like an article I wrote on this called like the problem with performance problems, where like there's just like all like I need to publish it. Like I think our marketing team needs to publish it, but it's literally just like one of the biggest things is just like not fair to the rest of your team, and all it does is like piss off your high performers. And like, they're like intrinsically going to be motivated to just like succeed and grow, and you want to engender that. But like, you also don't want them being like, man, who is this like ass clown over here? Right? Like all that's going to do is like bum them out at a margin, and yeah, it's just that like, I guess that's been tough over the last few years, but maybe things are changing a little bit. So Alexander has an interesting question here about channel sales. What is your experience with channel sales? How can we gain more control of the sales process of our channel partners? What are the leverages that we can use? Did you ever work with any channels at all?
No.
I have. No. Well, so I think the big thing there, Alex, is like one, I think a big thing is, and I'm not sure where, what Alex's solution is that he represents here is, but like you got like channel partners are in the business of like making money. That's like literally like that's what they do. And they like, so the first and foremost thing is like they're gonna want to understand that they like that this thing is gonna sell for them, right? And like they're not really in the business of they're not in the business of like taking a flyer on something, like taking a risk. And so at least from in startups, it's something that you just have to be very careful about, is thinking that the channel is going to sell something that's not proven. Like they're not going to do that, right? The channel fulfills demand. It doesn't generate demand. So there has to be like a need in the market in order to do that. So then once, like if that is the case and you have like good, like use Atrium as an example, like we have nearly 300 customers and what have you, like we'll probably get to a point where it makes sense for us to have partners, not because like they're going to like generate demand for us and like kind of beat things out of the bushes. It's more that like these people are going to already they're going to show up talking to someone and say, hey, you know what, like we really need help, managing our team by metric. And then that, like, no one had to push on them and say like, hey, you really should be managing your team, metrically better. In this case, someone's like asking for the thing and saying, and then the channel partner can be like, oh, I have the perfect solution for you, versus like pushing it on folks. So I think that like those are really important things there. And then once the channel partner like has had that demand come to them and say like, oh, do XYZ, like do you have an idea of how I might be able to manage my team by metric better or whatever, you want to make it so they can turn around to the vendor, like Atrium or whatever kind of whatever company, and then do what's known as deal registration. Because I think this is one thing that Alex is talking about. It's like, how can we gain more control over the sales process with your channel partners? Get involved in it, right? And so what ends up, like, the way to kind of think about that is like oftentimes people get concerned that they're going to have to pay, like, oh, I'm going to pay the AE on this and I'm going to pay the channel partner. It's like, well, yeah, you are going to pay and like, oh, that's double paying. It's actually not double paying, right? Because the channel partner is essentially the slice of marketing, right? Like you didn't have to have an SDR create that op, right? Like marketing didn't have to source that op or whatever. It's like, that's like the slice that's going to go to the channel partner there. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Alex. One thing kind of like related to the team stuff, Milena, and I think this is something that is more and more common nowadays, is being a remote leader, or like managing a remote team and kind of like what have you. What would kind of be like some kind of feedback you might have to folks around how to do that, what some best practices are, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I personally, I don't like being a remote leader, but it's just, the nature of where we're at right now. So I do make it a point to go to headquarters like every 6 weeks, in order to build that bond and have those spontaneous conversations or deal stormings or problem solving, interactions that you wouldn't normally have in a more, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you have to like generate that
Mm-hmm.
that interaction,
Yeah.
and it's like it's fine, but it's not as like exciting, So I think just be intentional about seeing the team face to face on a regular cadence, whatever that means for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very lucky that so first of all, Atrium's based in San Francisco, and you guys we're going to the office. I'm not, but Atrium, the San Francisco Atriumites are going to the office from Tuesday through Thursday, including, like one of my managers, Sean, he goes into the office, right? And so he's the extension of me while I'm not there. So if you can find that ally and person that you really, really trust and, just gets it to kind of be that extension of you, in some shape or form, like that's helpful as well. And I'm also a really big fan of like, if somebody closes a deal, no matter how big or how small, like call them, FaceTime them, congratulate them on that success, or what, maybe they didn't close the deal, maybe they sourced enough, whatever it is, like celebrate that big or small win with them. And that can be kind of like that fist bump that you might have done in the office if you had been together at that time.
Yep.
And of course, using Atrium helps too, right?
Yeah, but I think I think one of the things, and I do a master class on like, managing remote sales teams via metric is actually one of our customer success managers, a gentleman named Carson Kaufman, who's he used to be a seller at Atrium. He's very, very, very like extremely bright with respect. I mean, extremely bright in general, and extremely bright with respect to like data-driven sales management and kind of stuff like that, but also like very emotionally aware and very empathic. And so he actually realized, like when we went remote, that like all the kind of like all the missing stuff, all the little missing stuff that like you don't notice that it's missing until then you like see it, like you see it live when you're like in the office or what have you. So either and it's not either, it's like what you have to do is you have to fill that back in. So as an example, you come out here every 6 weeks. I actually go to Atlanta on a similar schedule as well, which is great because we actually have a ton of customers. I mean, obviously, hanging out with your sales leader is like, that's fine and whatever, but we also have a bunch of customers that are out there. Whatever. We also have a ton of customers that are out there as well, which is super fun. And actually, I guess we're at the point where we have so many customers, like I can land in pretty much any major metro and like put together a 10-person customer dinner, which is nice. But I think that's good. But then when you don't have like but then also like fill in other things, like I think your point there around like just calling people kind of like serendipitously, I think this is something like, if anyone follows me on Twitter, they know that I hate Slack with the fire of 1,000 suns, because people they hide behind like chatting with each other, which like literally the video button is right there, just like video on, right?
Yeah.
Like just call their ass, right?
Yeah.
It's like talking with reps, just like, hey, I think I see their mobile number and their signature right there. Why are you replying to their email? Why are you replying to their email right now? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Yeah. But I think like for managers, that's the same sort of thing too. And I try to do this as much as possible. And just like drop in on people. I'm like, what's up? How's it going? Like, hey, great job on that. No, right? I think there's that. I think other, like, just from a bit more kind of tactical standpoint, I think contending with time offsets is I think it's something that you can you can contend with if you're thoughtful. Like as an example, one of the things that we've done is, because Milena's on the East Coast and most of our team is on the West Coast here, you pull non-selling stuff earlier in the day here. So like I know that you have a bunch of one-on-ones, like your one-on-one schedule starts at like 7 and 8 with our sellers. So like, because obviously we don't want to knock out selling hours during like Pacific time or whatever, like that would obviously be bad. And so just pulling it forward into the 8 a.m. block or the 7 a.m. block. And I like to brag about this. I lead by example. Milena's on my one-on-one is at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Her 9 a.m. But I think that can be a really, like, pulling things forward can be really good. I think another thing that account executives don't do as much as they and I used to do this like crazy when I was selling Atrium, is like being mindful of like time zones and saying, oh, I can extend my calendar, right? Like, oh, this person's in Boston. That means that I can do a 7 a.m. call with them or an 8 a.m. call with them. Because like that's especially with Milena manages our more senior sellers. And because then they can pull in, you on the call or whatever. And I think those are kind of like tactical things that can that folks can do. There anything else to add on that?
I think you can do this whether you're remote or not, but I think it's more important to do it when you are remote. It's like, if there has been a big win, or if somebody's like sick, like send them out, or they're like just really tired from working like a 70-hour week. It's like, send them an Uber Eats card, for $50. Like, you know what, go rest, get some yummy food and like enjoy, But again, that's not necessarily a remote thing, though I do think it means more when you are remote.
Yeah, totally. Will has a fun question here. When coaching a rep, what are your keys for creating tangible outcomes and learnings?
Well, do you remember the goals and risks framework that we used to do? I don't know if you do. See, I think that's my favorite way of creating tangible outcomes and learnings, right? So before every customer interaction, whether planned, like a Zoom meeting, or it's like, hey, I just got this reply from an open op. Of course, you're not going to just reply. You have to pick up the phone and call them. But before you call them, like, have a plan, right? How can I get as much information, or how can I advance the deal as much as possible in this, like, what could be a 3-minute interaction or 30-minute interaction, depending on what happens, but be ready to maximize it, right? So if you, before that customer interaction, again, whether planned or unplanned, know what your goal is, know what success looks like before the customer interaction. So it's like when you hang up the phone, you're like, oh, damn, like that was a good call because I learned the go live date, because I learned who the signer was, because they told me that if it were solely up to them, they would go with, SalesLoft versus Outreach, or with, Atrium versus Squared. Right. So it's like that's one thing that I do, is the goals and risks framework. And of course you're armed with what it is that you want to accomplish, but then you also think ahead of time of like, what's going to punch my plan in the face. It's like, well, they could be like, oh, I don't know. Or they could be like, oh, I haven't been able to talk to so-and-so. Right. Or they could say, you know what, I prefer your competitor, and here's why. Right. So don't fumble.
But plan accordingly. It's like, just make sure that you're like playing a little bit of chess there, as opposed to just being like purely reactive. Like, hey, what's the cascade that could come out of this? Yeah.
Exactly.
I think so. I actually just did one of our master classes yesterday on data-driven one-on-ones with and actually we had Sean, one of our sales managers, ride along, which was super fun. But I think the important thing that kind of Will ask here is like, what are your keys for creating tangible outcomes and learnings? And I think my response to that would be, there's like what Milena just talked about, which is very tactical around like how to coach or what have you. The thing, I'm a big process guy, and so the thing that I would say there is that it's not like a one-off sort of thing. It's like trust the process. And so if you have, like, to use the one-on-one example, our belief is that your one-on-ones should be about the seller and their performance, and like the thing that you're working on with, like the things that you're working on with them, whatever like the particular thing is that we're trying to glow up or what have you. And then also like, how they're feeling and those sort of things. It should not be about deal management and deal strategy. That should exist. It should just be a different meeting. We call them sales strategy, deal strategy meetings, right? Or a pipeline review. So then if you actually have those one-on-ones that are then cadenced, like appropriately scheduled, maybe it's like a half hour every 2 weeks. And then moreover, you have like documentation that you're kind of saying, hey, this is the thing that we're working on. And like last time we said that this was going to be the thing that you were going to work on and you were going to do, and like be very, very tactical around, we are working with you on your self-prospecting, because your self-prospecting is lower than the rest of the team and not hitting the goal that we want. And the mechanism by which we're going to do that is we have blocked 90 minutes on your calendar on Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings for you to do prospecting. And I have enabled you with this SalesLoft cadence right here. And you have these accounts that have been in right here with these contacts that have been pre-filled for you, or you have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator seat or whatever. And you're going to do this in the way that we're going to measure you is by seeing how many net new accounts you've touched, right, during the trailing 14-day time period, as indicated by this Atrium report right here. We're going to set a little goal on that as well. And so we're going to expect you to have touched 50 net new accounts, and we want you to engaging 3 people per. So we're going to expect that there's going to be at least 150 new contacts, I guess at sales loft, they call them like day ones, right? Like new contacts that you've engaged. Our metric for that is new contacts engaged. And that's what we're going to do. And when we come back together in 2 weeks, we're going to look at these links and we're going to see what's going to happen, right? And so this like that process of saying, hey, being very explicit, like making the path very easy, right? But then having that kind of like credible threat of, hey, like we're gonna have accountability here, and like we did put this on your calendar. And then when 2 weeks shows up, you go and you look at that, and like if it happened, yay, high fives to everyone. Like, oh, look at that, you sourced like 5 ops yourself, yay, right? And if it didn't, right? If it didn't, that's like, I mean, not cool, but like that's cool. We're not giving up, right? Like because we're gonna keep honey badgering this until we fix it, and then the process just kind of continues. And so that would be like my big thing is the keys for creating things that are actually like for actually making sure that the behavior changes is like the act of management, which is what we just described, versus like random acts of management. Like, hey, I need you to self prospect more. Okay, just figure it out. Right. Versus what we just described right there. And of course, like that's going to be like ideally that should be different on a rep by rep basis. Like, hey, you need to work on your self prospecting. Your pipeline is a fucking disaster. You're a pig pen. Right. Like we need, pipe hygiene work with you. You right here, we're working on, down funnel management and kind of like not getting lost in the the hall of mirrors. Right. And like we're going to measure you that based on conversion rates, et cetera. Those are kind of like the recommendations that I would have there.
And I think,
So I
we
know.
always talk about like hashtag ABD, like always be discovering. And I think it's important also when you do have those looping back moments, like, in the next one-on-one, we're going to track progress against this goal that we set for your prospecting or, pipe management. It's like, if they hit it, it's like, do discovery. It's like, hey, like, what do you think changed? What empowered you to now like be able to do this? Or conversely, if like they didn't hit those targets, it's like, what happened? Tell me more about why you weren't able to send these many emails, right? Like, and then at that point, it's like, I think that's just important to understand like morale of the rep, to see if they're even equipped to be able to get close to achieving those goals, right? Because sometimes there's like a mental blocker or just
whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. That's one of my favorite sales coaching books is 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach by Corey Bray and Hillman Story. And one of the reasons why I like it so much, I mean, it's written as a novel, which is like pretty fun. It's like, an easy page turner, which is fun. The other thing that's kind of fun about it is like it's very much like when you read it, it's kind of like MedPick being applied to like management, right? Just like, hey, what are like the negative implications associated with like not changing your behavior? Like, oh, well, I really want to like, I want to pay off my car.
Yeah.
I want to buy a house or like whatever. Oh, okay, got it. So if you don't self-store, like you have you got a 20% win rate, and our ASP is like 20K or whatever. So if you source 10 ops, you should close 2 deals out of that. And that's 40K, right? And that's that's another 5K of money in your pocket there. And so I suppose if you don't source these ops, you're kind of like taking 5K out of your own pocket. Am I thinking about that right? Gosh, I never thought about that. Weird, right? Which of course is like a really effective discovery conversations, like open people's eyes to the things that like they didn't think about previously, right?
And they're bought in because they came to that conclusion, not the man.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing that I wanted to kind of get your take on, because like we talked a little bit about like competitive selling environments and also selling to non-technical users or like non-technical customers. Selling to sellers, like that's something that I mean, a lot of like sales tech and kind of like MarTech are pretty ramping spaces right now. So there's a lot of folks out there that are selling to sales leaders, sales operations, et cetera. What are your what's your take on it? Like, what do you like about it? What's less fun?
I love selling to salespeople. I think we're really fortunate at Atrium that we sell to salespeople. At SalesLoft, same thing. I didn't realize how lucky we were at SalesLoft until I left and then came back to selling to salespeople. Similarly to being in a hyper competitive environment, when you sell to a salesperson, they're not just evaluating your solution and your product, they're evaluating you as a seller. Because they're like,
Totally.
and so you have to be on your toes. The sales experience always matters, but in my opinion, when you're selling to a seller, it matters even more. If you're doing a really great job, guess what? You might get a job offer after the sales cycle, even if you get a deal, right? I think that happened actually with one of my reps at SalesLoft, Rachel Cha. She left SalesLoft to go to, I think, PayScale, and she had a sales cycle with PayScale, and the CRO was so impressed by her that she just, got yoinked by PayScale. So I think that it's just wonderful. And so it helps elevate your profession as well, because you have to be on your toes. And the last thing I'll say is, like, we speak the same language as salespeople. So you can, instead of like selling to like a marketer or like somebody in finance, in sales, you can say, hey, so Pete, we've been talking for the last few weeks. If you were me, like, when would you pipe this for? Because, like, Mills is up my ass around my close dates. Like, what would you do if you were me? And they understand that question. And because they feel the same pain that, we do as sellers, like, they want to help. Even if they don't buy from you, like, we're still in it together. Right. And I think that's why MSP is also so powerful, is because a community of sellers, like, we need to commiserate together sometimes, or we need to like, because it's tough, right? Like, sales is a high risk, high reward profession. And it's tough. So there's a lot of pressure to be good at it. And I think that selling to sellers really helps to accelerate becoming good at it.
Yeah. I think there's a related thing there, is like, you are being you're being evaluated in your sales cycle. And so I think that there's like, we get this actually a lot, where people are like, irrespective of whether or not they bought or not, they're like, that was an absolutely fantastic sales cycle. Like, I get all sorts of like secret shopping, like emails just like randomly being sent to me, like, by the way, Peter just like was a consummate professional here, or like, Brian killed it around the XYZ and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, always like, oh yeah, take a screenshot, throw it in the Kudos Slack channel, etc. So
Wait,
but I
Slack
think
channel? What? You use the Slack channel? No.
it's for broadcasting information that people it's for broadcasting information that people can choose to access or not. It's not for mission critical things. So but one of the things that I think you can really lean into that, and could say like, hey, we are going to have an organization that is like absolutely fantastic, that is extremely crisp, that just slays from an operationally excellent, like analytically excellent sales organization. Because especially if you're selling sales tech, like, it really helps you to show up and like, be an expert, right? And so if you're like loosey goosey, and you're showing up and you're like, selling sales engagement software, like call recording software or whatever, you're really just like missing an opportunity there. Because that's kind of one of the things I talk about in my book, is how salespeople are like, they're kind of like the tip of the spear of the distribution of like new innovation, new technology. And if you don't like, if you don't embody, if your sales organization does not embody like, sales excellence, and you're selling a sales like excellent solution, like, ooh.
And that's a huge miss. Then people will buy your product, even if your product is excellent.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like totally a miss, because it's one of those things where like 1 + 1 can equal like 5. Where if you have a sick product and the organization, and in our case, like, I think it's like 1 + 1 + 1 = 10, because you also can be a really great user of your own product as well, right? And like, we run our entire business out of Atrium, and we're kind of like, we're definitely like double black diamond when it comes down to that. But what it does is it makes the sellers and customer success and what have you just like absolutely fantastic at what they do. And then there's just like a very positive feedback loop where they can be very consultative, even outside of like the specific thing that we're selling right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have the one-on-one Slack channels to kind of guide one-on-one conversations, and that's an anecdote that a lot of us used during a sales cycle to demonstrate an example of how data-driven sales management helped to change behavior and elevate team performance. So I think gathering those anecdotes, and you can be an SDR and be able to talk about that. And that's such a gift. It's like, wow, you only have 2 years of professional experience, but because what you sell or, set opportunities for is what you also use yourself, like that gives you so much street cred that is beyond your 2 years of professional experience. That is still very, very legitimate.
Yep. Well, cool. Mills, we're out of time, unfortunately. Super fun.
It went by fast.
It was delightful. Yeah, totally. It always does. Everyone always like all Power Hour guests are always like, man, that was so fun. And like, wow, it's been an hour. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for coming and hanging out. Folks, go ahead and join us next week. We're gonna have John Scherer, who's the VP of Sales from Lattice. He's absolutely fantastic. He's gonna be joining us on the 23rd, which is next Friday. Milena, have a great weekend. Okay.
You do the same. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, later.